Hey, thanks for watching. The Apostle Paul said in 2 Timothy 2, "Remember Christ Jesus, raised from the dead, descended from David. This is my gospel, for which I am suffering, even to the point of being chained like a criminal." Paul believed as a fact in the resurrection of Jesus Christ, as did the other followers of Jesus early on, and they were willing to suffer in regards to that. C.S. Lewis said, "Christianity, if false, is of no importance. If true, it's of ultimate importance. The only thing it can't be is moderately important." See, if Christianity is just some fairy tale to make people feel better about their lives, I want no part of it. It's either true or not. Some people say, oh, it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere. Nah, that's lame. I'm not going to waste my time following some God if I don't really think he's real. I could stand on top of a building and say, I sincerely don't believe in gravity. And if I step off, I'm still probably going to hit the ground, won't I? And so, truth is the issue. And faith is not opposed to reason. There are many facts on which I base my Christian faith. I've given some in stating the evidences from the Bible, the credibility of the Bible, this amazing book with substantial archaeological and bibliographical and prophetic evidence that support it. There's a lot of strong reasons to place one's faith in the Bible. So it's not faith or facts, it's faith upon the right facts. And all religious beliefs are not equally true and valid. Let's not go there. Again, like C.S. Lewis said, if Christianity is not true, dump it. If it's true, it's really important because it deals with eternal matters and realities. So, I do believe that Christianity is true, and therefore atheism would be foolish. And I want to talk today about some of the issues concerning the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This is the foundation, this is the cornerstone for all of Christianity. If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, then it's all just a sad story of some nice guy getting himself pinned on a Roman cross. And a lot of people suffering after that because they believed in it. Well, if that's all it is, I don't want it either. But Jesus did rise from the dead, and the evidence is significant. Gary Habermas is probably one of the world's leading experts as far as from the Christian perspective of the resurrection and evidence for the resurrection. Gary Habermas, Habermas. He has quite a few YouTube blurbs if you want to look him up. Brilliant man. Humble man. He has a list in this book, Resurrection, the Risen Jesus, and Future Hope. And in this book, in the first chapter, he has gathered a list of the different historical content that theologians and historians actually from all different persuasions, Christian, non-Christian, basically ancient biblical scholars, even Jewish, people that have many different views. These are the factoids concerning the life of Jesus that they would find agreement on. The historical Jesus. 1, that Jesus died by Roman crucifixion. 2, he was buried, most likely in a private tomb. Soon afterwards, the disciples were discouraged, bereaved, and despondent, having lost hope. 4, Jesus' tomb was found empty very soon after his interment. 5, the disciples had experiences that they believed were actual appearances of the risen Jesus. 6, due to these experiences, the disciples' lives were thoroughly transformed, even being willing to die for this belief. 7, the proclamation of the resurrection took place very early, at the beginning of church history. 8, the disciples' public ministry and preaching of the resurrection took place in the city of Jerusalem, where Jesus had been crucified and buried shortly before. 9, the gospel message centered on the death and resurrection of Jesus. 10, Sunday is the primary day for gathering and worshiping. 11, James, the brother of Jesus and a former skeptic, was converted when he believed and saw the risen Jesus. 12, just a few years later, Saul of Tarsus later known as Paul, became a Christian believer due to an experience that he believed was an appearance of the risen Jesus. And again, these are scholars from a liberal perspective, coming from a place that they don't believe in miracles, but these are the historical facts that they do agree upon. Now, Jesus foretold his death and resurrection frequently. It was a major part of his message. The disciples didn't really understand what he was talking about. They seemed rather dense. But we know that Jesus' death on a Roman cross, as it said in that list, was certain. The Romans crucified thousands of people. They were pretty good at killing people. And some people say, well, maybe Jesus just swooned, he fainted or something on the cross. Well, first of all, we know that the Roman scourge, which was ordered by Pilate, the scourging usually killed people. The whips were embedded with bits of bone and metal and glass, and so when the whip was hit on the back, it would rip off pieces of flesh. And a lot of people didn't even survive the scourging, let alone the crucifixion. But a doctor gave a description of what probably happened at the death of Jesus. When the spear was thrust into his side, he was already killed. Remember, they wouldn't break his legs to hurry up the death process because the centurion said he was already dead. So they thrust a spear into his side, and the Gospel of John in chapter 19 records that blood and water flowed out of the wound. And this doctor says that study of the Greek word for side used in this passage is pleura, which clearly refers to the chest rather than the abdomen. Our lungs and the walls of the internal chest cavity are lined with a thin, clear membrane called the pleural lining. Thus it seems probable the spear wound was to one side of the chest wall. Tradition has depicted the right side, although John is not specific. Medically speaking, this would support the idea of the flow of blood and water from Christ's side, since the spear would first puncture the lung and allow the accumulated water, probably due to pulmonary edema, to flow out. In congestive heart failure caused by stress, the right side of the heart enlarges and results in fluid collecting in the lungs, pulmonary edema, and pericardium. As the spear continued through the lung, it would next puncture the pericardium, the sac around the heart, allowing more water to drain from the wound. Finally, the enlarged right ventricle of the heart would be punctured, causing a large flow of blood. So we know Jesus died. It was a certainty. It was not some case of him fainting and then reviving in the tomb. He was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. As the prophet foretold, he would be buried in the tomb of a rich man. Joseph of Arimathea was known to be a member of the ruling council of the Sanhedrin. That would be comparable to a United States senator or a U.S. governor today. This was a famous man, a well-known man in Jerusalem and in Israel. And he offered his tomb for this Jesus to be buried in. So the Romans knew where the tomb was. The Jews knew where the tomb was. Everyone knew where the tomb was. There was no question that he was buried in the tomb. It was sealed with a Roman seal and posted with a Roman guard. Now, a Roman guard, if a Roman guard were to fall asleep on the job and the person they were guarding escaped or whatever, they would be killed on the spot. It was the death penalty for a Roman to fall asleep on the job. So the Roman guard was there, and they knew where the tomb was. It wasn't a case of a mistaken location, and they couldn't find the body of Jesus, or that the disciples somehow stole the body and hid it. Because who would be willing to die for what they know to be a lie? Someone might be willing to die for something they know, or they are confused about, or mistaken about, or deceived about, but they're not going to die for something they know is a lie. Not men of this kind of character who followed the teachings that we read in the New Testament. That would be foolish. We ought to also add to the credibility of the resurrection story of Jesus Christ in that each of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, record that women were the first ones to visit, to find the empty tomb. Women. And in first century Palestine, the testimony of women was totally disregarded even in a court of law. It was next to meaninglessness. So if men were just concocting a story, they would not concoct a story in which women were the first eyewitnesses to the risen Christ and the empty tomb. That would be ludicrous. But that is what the Gospels do record.